Okay, I'm fortunate enough to be with Jim Carrier, who is an award-winning journalist and author of 9 books. He has written for the National Geographic, Sail Magazine, and the New York Times. After 20 years as a radio newscaster, Associated Press correspondent, and newspaper editor, and 13 years as the Denver Post's Rocky Mountain Ranger, he is a survivor of 6 hurricanes, including Luis, Marilyn, George, and Mitch. Jim, thank you for being with me this evening.
It's a pleasure. Thank you.
Now, I understand that you're living in Montgomery, Alabama, but you were living aboard your vessel there for a short period of time. Can you elaborate a little on that?
Sure. I left the Denver Post in 1997 and fulfilled a lifelong dream of living aboard my boat and writing. And so I bought the boat in the west side of Florida, and then I took it up to Beaufort, North Carolina, refitted it, came down, went to Bahamas, went to Cuba, and was anchored off of Key West during the summer of 1998.
And then we had Hurricane Mitch develop in the southwestern Caribbean Sea, and you were in Key West at that time, correct?
That's right. We had actually just gone through Hurricane George, which was a direct hit as a bear category, just a little over Category 1, near Category 2 storm that came right over Key West. My boat survived that, and I thought the storm was going to be over. The season was more or less over once you've survived one of those. And then all of a sudden, almost out of nowhere, a tropical storm, which was what was kind of the remnants of Mitch, had come back to life in the Bay of Campeche in Mexico, and came roaring across the Keys, killed a couple more people, and then went on across Florida and into all the way to Iceland.
Now, Mitch was a very large and dangerous hurricane down in the southwestern Caribbean Sea. And there was a ship called the Fantome, and this is the ship that you write about in your book called The Ship in the Storm, about the Hurricane Mitch and the Fantome. Now, the ship is one of the Barefoot Cruises, is that correct? Windjammer Cruises.
Windjammer Barefoot Cruise Company, which is based in Miami, and has ships throughout the Caribbean. And its whole modus operandi really is to take old historic sailing ships and then turn them into very informal cruise lines where, as the name implies, people can go barefoot. They always say dress up dinner with the captain is a clean T-shirt. And they go to a lot of ports of calls, smaller islands, and places off the beaten path. People are very fond of it, and they have a very high return rate, and it's a very popular company.
Now, this ship how many passengers were on board before they decided to evacuate the people on ship?
It was almost full. There were 97 passengers, and it also had a crew of over 40 men and women at the time. At that time, they were operating out of a little village in Honduras called Omoa, O-M-O-A. And they would make alternate trips both to Belize and then to the Bay Islands, which are a beautiful set of islands off the north coast of Honduras.
Now, as this ship is sailing, they were heading towards Belize. From my recollection of reading your book, they were heading towards Belize, and this hurricane was becoming more and more of a threat. And they felt that it was going to head towards Belize because of the model data that was out at that time. Yeah. And so they decided to head back away from Belize and head down towards Honduras. And from what I recall reading your book, there was some problems with weather data going into those models. There were some balloons that were not able to be sent out, weather balloons. The data from Belize Weather Station was quiet because it was struck by lightning. The National Hurricane Center did the best they could under very difficult circumstances, but obviously the lack of data, we might not be here discussing this book today had there been maybe more information available to put into those models.
Well, that's they say of computers, garbage in, garbage out. So that if you don't have good data, the models have nothing to crunch, and as a result, they kind of start making stuff up or extrapolating data maybe that they hadn't that would have been given too much weight that wouldn't be otherwise if you had other data. And as you said, because of economic conditions and a whole host of reasons, largely having to do with the economy, I think, and sort of the third world character of that area in that particular time, they did not have good data about the forecast. This storm was very, very erratic and did not operate at all on a right-hand curve up toward the Yucatan and then into the Gulf of Mexico and then sometimes toward the United States. But in this case, the Hurricane Mitch actually took really a 90-degree left-hand turn right as it approached the Bay Islands and went right straight into Honduras. And just as it reached the shore, it stopped and sat for about 36 hours. And that's where the ship happened to be. And it ended up, we know now from retracing radars through the hurricane hunters, that it probably ran right into the eye wall of a Category 5 storm at that time.
Wow. Now they were trying to. I know from the reports of the Captain Guyon was his name.
Guyon March.
Guyon March. He had the opinion that if he could get due south of that eye of Hurricane Mitch, that they could ride the waves and get away, actually slingshot them, so to speak, away from the worst part of that hurricane.
Well,
but I guess that never materialized.
You're right. I mean, originally what he was hoping to do was to, and this had worked for this company for almost 50 years in the Eastern Caribbean, because there you had the advantage of islands that you can more or less go all the way around and take shelter depending on where the hurricane is going. And you can get shelter from the sea, which is really the killer, is the sea conditions. The wind may blow, but that what you really want to do is find some way to get out of the wave action. And so they were hoping to do the same thing under the Bay Islands. And there's a big, long, skinny island there called Roatan. Some of your listeners who are skin divers will know of the Bay Islands. And Roatan, it's a long, skinny island about 2 miles wide and about 12 miles long, but it's like a little mountain ridge. And it would have been effective if the hurricane had not come down on them. But they were tacking back and forth in the lee of that is between the island and the 25-mile stretch before the mainland, until the hurricane took that left-hand turn and came right down, and then they were totally exposed. And there was no way they could, the only way at that point, the only way they could go, given the power of the engines, was hoping that they could slingshot, as you say, out from underneath in what is sometimes thought of as the safe quadrant of a hurricane, and emerge out of the bottom as the storm passes over you. But it didn't. It kept coming right straight down,
right,
and they ran into the wall.
Well, I have an interview here with Jerry Gerald that I did last year, and the subject of the Fantome came up in our conversation. And here's a brief clip of that, and I just want to hear what your opinion is on this. Hold on just 1 second.
And boy, there was a lot of soul searching over that one to see if we could have done anything better. Models just failed us. It was a Category 5 hurricane out there, and it was just an awful thing.
And the Fantome.
Yeah, sunk a little ship down there, a little sailing vessel, the Fantome.
Have you read that book?
Yeah,
I read that book. It was really fascinating. I thought it was a very good hurricane book. It's probably one of the better ones I've read.
I did too. I proofed that for him before it was sent out, and wrote a nice little endorsement for it. I thought it was fantastic. I really enjoyed every minute of it.
And that was Jerry Gerald last year commenting about your book. I did ask him if he had any opinions on what he thought was the final chapter of what happened when that ship whether it broke apart or was breached. And he felt that it was probably broke up due to the wave action, or maybe it ran aground in that area. What do you think happened? When that ship finally rolled over, or whatever it did, and broke apart, what do you think happened at that very moment?
Well, I in my book, I kind of just paint the various scenarios that are possible, given the experts of the shipbuilding and design and the conditions that we were able to recreate from the folks at the Weather Channel and the Hurricane Center and other folks, and reports on the ground. There were many people, of course, lying on the ground just 10 miles away. We know, based on the GPS reports, where that ship went down, and it was not shallow water, so it's unlikely that it struck a reef or anything. It's most likely that it went down in a hurry, like a matter of seconds. We have the belly radar of not the hurricane hunters, but the hurricane research team that was sailing, or whether it was flying into Hurricane Mitch, at the very moment that ship disappeared.
Oh, really?
Yeah, within seconds of the last radio report from when the radio went dead on that. It was radio telephone, satellite telephone. When it went dead to the headquarters back in Miami, that within seconds, the hurricane research plane from Tampa punched through into the eye wall and flew around for the next hour and a half. And we have a complete radar record of from the belly radar of that plane. And we've gone back, the folks at the Hurricane Research Center and I, and looked for a blip in those waves of that ship, because it was a big 300-foot iron ship. And there is one suspicious blip in the first few seconds that maybe lasted 6 or 9 seconds. It could also have been kind of a little cell within the hurricane, within the eye wall itself. But it did not last. It disappeared, and so whether it broke up or turned over, whatever it did, it went down in a tremendous hurry.
Now, they did find pieces of this ship?
The top deck was starting to break up. Even they reported that by satellite telephone. A lot of furniture, places where they kept cushions, and a lot of water. They were getting 3-4 foot green water over the top of this 12 to 18 foot bridge, and so they were getting tremendous amount of breakage that they could see even while they were conscious. And then later, on the island of Guanaja in particular, we were able to find, or they were able to find, and I actually saw bits of it myself, a door, many life jackets, a railing to one of the stairwells that went down below deck. And it was because of those things that they could identify the ship and identify more or less what had happened to it, at least in terms of where the men might have been and what might have happened to them.
Is that unusual, from your understanding, to not find very much at all from a ship that large?
Well, I think it is unusual because this ship was in many ways fragile. The top parts of it were. It was kind of a party deck, so it had a lot of it's called Angelique. It's kind of fake teak, cheap kind of teak, and it's tongue and groove, and it was a lot of furniture and dance floors and that kind of thing. But the top floors were the party deck, they called it, was not designed for a storm at all. So that's what really broke up. I think most ships today are kind of all of a piece, metal or plastic, and you're not going to get that kind of breakage of wood.
Well, in 1939, they renamed this ship the Fantome.
Right.
I've heard that it's a bad luck to change the name of a ship. That I don't know if that had anything to do with it, but what's your opinion on that?
Well, I don't know. I renamed my sailboat when I bought it in '97 and called it Ranger because I was known as the Rocky Mountain Ranger. And I went through a little ceremony actually on my boat, a renaming ceremony, and providing some champagne for the gods of the sea and the gods of the wind, and in hopes that maybe that superstition, as it is, it would not come true for me. And so far, knock on woods, it hasn't. I sailed it across the Atlantic 2 years ago, and it's now resting in the Mediterranean.
You sail by yourself, or do you have people with you?
I have sailed by myself, but across the Atlantic, I felt that I needed help because I wouldn't be able to sleep. I'd be so worried. As it turns out, I was worried all the time, but I still managed to catch an hour and a half or so every once in a while. So I had two crewmen across the Atlantic.
Now, sitting here while I'm talking to you, thumbing through this book, The Ship in the Storm, and in the center of about halfway through, you have a lot of illustrations in here and pictures of the crew.
If they were alive, because that's what I was truly trying to do in the book. Bring them back to life, and in a way make the book a memorial to their lives. These were men who, in their native countries were doing the best they could, and the only reason they were on the board ship probably was because it was better than anything they could find at home. They weren't paid very well, but it was better than anything they could find at home. And they were not in control. They were kind of stuck on this boat when the captain made his decisions. And so, one of the things that really struck me, you talk about, legacy or whether these people were bitter. One of the startling things I found among the surviving family was the consistency with which many of the women had dreams or images of their loved ones telling them that they were dying or were lost and how they were lost. And this happened to relatives all over the world, in London, in England rather, in Romania, and then throughout the Caribbean. And they were so consistent and so accurate that it was almost as if they'd flown there or been there on the eyes of an angel, if you would.
But they were aware that this ship was in trouble. Weren't most of them being contacted by phone or? No,
they were not.
So they did know there was a hurricane down there?
Well, they knew there was a hurricane, but most of these families, it came as a shock that this ship was lost, and most of them weren't told for days after.
Yeah, I just can't get over the fact that most of these guys, if not all of, well, I wouldn't want to say all of them, but they probably knew how to swim, and being that they're out sailing in the ocean, you would think that somebody would have survived or had a chance to grab onto something that floats. And but do you figure maybe they were all inside, battened down, and they just drowned that way?
Well, I mean, the scene that we were able to recreate, given the conditions of the ocean, and you can because of wave models, Steve Lyons at the Weather Channel and the people at the Hurricane Center and all, who have done a lot of, and the Hurricane Research Bureau, who have done a lot of modeling about what it's like in a hurricane and have flown through and actually tested their theories on observation. It's really a watery hell in there, and in a Category 5 storm, the surface of the water kind of turns an aqua blue, kind of like you'd see in shallow water in the Bahamas. But in fact, that is just this kind of frothy mix of water and foam and air that would be almost impossible, and it'd be a foot or two deep, and it would be almost impossible to be in and actually breathe. And not only that, given the sort of resonances of the various wave channels and the way waves come through and across and around a hurricane, I likened it to kind of like a street sweeper. And this boat would have been like a rubber ducky in it. So someone getting down into the water, you would have canyons and mountains of water and crashing waves and coming from all different directions. And this 300-foot boat, and and it was probably 40 foot wide. Could not survive it, and so neither could a man.
Yeah, I guess you're right. That's interesting you mentioned about the foam and not being able to breathe if you were down in the water. I never thought of that aspect of it, but I guess that does make a lot of sense. Hurricanes are so violent, I don't think most people have any idea, especially a Category 4 or 5, what kind of an environment that is. But
well, I mean, people nowadays are somewhat familiar with NASCAR driving, and you get speeds of 180, 200 miles an hour. Well, that's the speed of the wind in the eye wall, and the wave action under that is being swept along by that, and then across the eye, you've got waves being generated by the eye. Kind of, imagine the eye is like a donut. It's going around at the speed of a NASCAR race car. And then coming out of each side of that eye channel, if you will, that eye wall, which is about 12 miles wide, is a kind of like a furrow, if you would, like a plow, snow plow, of waves as well. So that's going across the eye and through it and back and forth, and really creating a nightmarish kind of panoply, if you would, of waves.
That's truly. I hope I never experience a Category 4 or 5. I mean, I love hurricanes. That's why I made Hurricane City. But to experience a Category 4 or 5, I think would be make you grow hair on your hands. And
well, they actually reported by satellite telephone that near the end, this big giant ship was rocking, rolling, heeling, as the term is called. 45 degrees port and 45 degrees starboard, so that it was arcing through 90 degrees. And imagine trying to even hold on, or find yourself crunched in a corner trying to stay upright and not get sick, and let alone be of any use to the boat. That's what was happening at the very end. I can tell you, as a sailor, and having gone through some hurricanes in '95 and then again in '98, that there tends to be kind of a party atmosphere in the Caribbean islands when a hurricane comes. Key West is famous for these hurricane parties, actually everywhere along the coast. Yeah. And I was drinking wine at somebody's house when Hurricane George came through there in '98. And now that I've researched the book and realized how wrong the Hurricane Center can be, and off by a category, and off by 50 or 80 miles on an average, I realized that I was stupid to stay in the Keys during that storm. And I would never again, if I could help it, be anywhere near a hurricane, let alone at sea. I would not even want to be on a low-lying island during one.
Well, as you were stating before about having people partying when there's a hurricane coming in, the fact of the matter is most people, when a hurricane's coming, are not going to experience the core of the hurricane, that are in the hurricane warning or hurricane watch zone. Only probably a small portion of the people are going to actually experience the hardcore, devastating winds around the core of a hurricane. And I have a clip here from Neil Frank explaining just that. Here it is.
The primary problem are those people who have gone through the fringes of a storm or through a minor storm and believe now that they have been through a hurricane.
That's Neil Frank. You know how long ago that was recorded?
No.
That was from 1980. Tropical Storm Dennis coming into South Florida.
Sure.
But Neil Frank has a lot of good sound bites. He's one of the better directors, I think, at the Hurricane Center. But he's true. I mean, so many people think that they've been through a hurricane when it was 80 or 90, 100 miles away. And that's why the party goes on, and they look at it as just a fun experience. But the ones that are unfortunate enough to be in the core of that hurricane and have all the damage occur, it's a whole different ballgame, and they have a whole new respect for hurricanes.
Right.
But, Jim, it was fantastic having you here on the broadcast. Your book is
living on coasts or on islands in hurricane season this year. The best of luck. It looks a little bit better than higher than normal this year, and every year is a new game.
That's right, and anywhere along the Atlantic seaboard or the Gulf of Mexico, especially down in the Caribbean islands, be prepared, have your shutters handy, and be prepared for the worst and hope for the best. And partying is not a good thing to do when a hurricane is coming, because
it sold about, I think, 25,000 hardbacks, which is pretty good, and the paperback is still in print, and in fact, the hardback is still in print as well. But Harcourt picked up the paperback, and that's been moving along nicely. And as odd as it is, every time a hurricane season comes along, there's interest in it, and I'm glad to sell a book. But it's because this is an annual event every summer, and this case really has become kind of a test case, study case for hurricane avoidance and what to do if you're on a boat and you're threatened by a hurricane, because they made a lot of mistakes.
That's right, and it's educational as well. So, again, thank you for being with me on this broadcast about the ship in the storm, the Fantome, and Hurricane Mitch. Jim Carrier, ladies and gentlemen.